In 20 minutes, one American soldier killed 25 German soldiers, captured 132 prisoners, and silenced 35 machine guns, using only his rifle and a pistol. Because Sergeant Alvin York, a humble Tennessee mountain man who once refused to fight on religious grounds, would become the most famous American hero of World War I. Welcome to Untold Heroes Stories. Which state are you watching from? We'd love to hear your military stories in the comments. The Medal of Honor stories told on this channel are completely true. Sources are in the description. Now, let's continue. Alvin York was born on December 13, 1887, in a two-room log cabin in Pall Mall, Tennessee, deep in the Cumberland Mountains. The third of 11 children born to William and Mary York, Alvin learned to hunt not for sport, but for survival. His family was so poor that their next meal often depended on his ability to bring home game from the unforgiving mountain wilderness. By age 9, Alvin could shoot squirrels through the head at 50 yards to avoid damaging the meat his family desperately needed. The boy had developed an almost supernatural accuracy born from necessity. Ammunition cost money the York family didn't have, so every shot had to count. He would spend hours in the mountains tracking deer and wild turkey through terrain that would challenge experienced outdoorsmen. When his father died suddenly, 11-year-old Alvin became the primary provider for his mother and 10 siblings. He took whatever work he could find, logging in dangerous mountain conditions, farming the rocky soil, working with railroad construction gangs. But hunting remained the family's main source of protein. Neighbors throughout Fentress County began talking about the York boys' incredible marksmanship. But young Alvin had another side that would complicate his future. He was known throughout the mountain communities as a hard-drinking, hard-fighting young man who spent Saturday nights in local saloons. He would drink corn whiskey and get into brawls that became legendary throughout the Cumberland Mountains. His reputation as both an expert marksman and a dangerous fighter made him someone to respect and fear. This wild lifestyle continued for years until 1914, when a dramatic spiritual awakening at a revival meeting at the Wolf River Church of Christ in Christian Union completely transformed him. During one emotional evening service, Alvin York experienced a religious conversion that changed everything about his life. The newly converted Alvin York gave up drinking, fighting, and gambling entirely. He became a deacon in his church and embraced the strict pacifist teachings of his denomination. The Church of Christ in Christian Union was explicitly opposed to all forms of violence and warfare, teaching that Christians should never take human life under any circumstances. This deeply held religious conviction would face its ultimate test on April 6, 1917, when the United States declared war on Germany and entered the Great War. When York received his draft notice on June 5, 1917, the 29-year-old mountain man faced an agonizing moral dilemma. After much prayer and soul-searching, York applied for conscientious objector status, writing simply on his draft card, "I don't want to fight." His application was denied because his denomination was not among the officially recognized pacifist churches. At Camp Gordon, Georgia, York's exceptional marksmanship skills were immediately noticed by his military instructors. During rifle practice sessions, while other recruits struggled to hit targets at 200 yards, York consistently scored perfect marks at distances up to 500 yards. But his religious concerns remained his primary focus. Major George Edward Buxton engaged York in lengthy theological discussions about the nature of war, duty, moral responsibility, and the protection of innocent life. They debated passages from the Bible for hours, particularly focusing on the complex concept of just war. During one crucial conversation, Major Buxton asked him to consider what Jesus meant when he said, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." The discussions continued for several weeks. Finally, Buxton gave York a 10-day leave to return home to Tennessee and pray about his decision. York spent those crucial days alone in the Cumberland Mountains, wrestling with his conscience and seeking divine guidance. He read his Bible constantly, particularly focusing on the Old Testament stories of David and Goliath. When York returned to camp, he had reached a momentous decision. He told Major Buxton that after much prayer and reflection, he believed God wanted him to serve his country and use his exceptional skills to protect his fellow soldiers and defend freedom. "I'm ready to do my duty," York told his commanding officer with quiet determination. "If God wants me to shoot, I'll shoot." In May 1918, York shipped out to France with Company G, 2nd Battalion, 328th Infantry Regiment, 82nd Infantry Division. The 82nd was nicknamed the All-American Division because it included soldiers from every state in the Union. York's first real exposure to combat came during the Saint-Mihiel offensive in September 1918. Though this battle was relatively minor, it gave York his first taste of actual warfare and confirmed that he could function effectively under fire. His calm demeanor and exceptional shooting skills impressed both his fellow soldiers and his officers. But it was during the massive Argonne offensive that Alvin York would write his name permanently in military history. The Argonne offensive was the largest American military operation of World War I, involving over 1 million American soldiers in a massive push designed to break through heavily fortified German defensive lines. The German positions in the dense Argonne Forest were among the strongest on the entire Western Front. The Germans had spent nearly 4 years fortifying these positions with multiple lines of deep trenches, reinforced concrete bunkers, extensive barbed wire entanglements, and dozens of carefully positioned machine gun nests. The terrain itself provided natural defensive advantages, dense forest broken by deep ravines and steep ridges. By early October 1918, after more than a week of continuous fighting, the American advance had slowed to a bloody crawl. German machine gun positions were inflicting devastating casualties on advancing American forces, and some units had been fighting continuously for days without making significant progress. On the morning of October 8, 1918, Company G was assigned to attack a heavily fortified German position known as Hill 223, located deep in the heart of the Argonne Forest. The hill was defended by experienced soldiers from the German 1st Battalion, 125th Landwehr Regiment. Intelligence reports indicated that the Germans had positioned at least 35 machine guns on and around Hill 223. Company G's mission was straightforward but extremely dangerous. Advance through the dense forest, capture the German trenches, and silence the machine gun nests that were preventing other American units from advancing. At 6:10 a.m., 17 men from Company G, led by Sergeant Bernard Early, began their advance through the dense mist-covered forest. The patrol included Corporal Alvin York, Acting Corporal William Cutting, and 14 other soldiers, all tasked with working around behind the German lines to attack the machine gun positions from the rear. As the American patrol moved through the forest, they quickly discovered much stronger German resistance than intelligence reports had indicated. The woods seemed filled with enemy soldiers, and machine gun fire appeared to come from every direction. The Americans soon found themselves not just behind enemy lines, but completely surrounded. At approximately 9 a.m., the patrol stumbled into a German command post located in a small valley near Hill 223. The Americans surprised about 20 German soldiers, including several officers who were having breakfast and planning their defensive operations. Sergeant Early immediately ordered his men to charge the German position. The surprised Germans, caught completely off guard, quickly threw down their weapons and surrendered. Among the prisoners was a German major who spoke excellent English. But the capture of the German command post was just the beginning of what would become one of the most extraordinary individual feats in military history. The sound of gunfire had immediately alerted other German units positioned throughout the area. Within minutes, German machine gunners positioned on the surrounding hills began directing devastating fire toward the valley where York's patrol was holding their prisoners. The German response was swift and overwhelming. Machine gun bullets rained down into the valley from multiple directions. 9 American soldiers, including Sergeant Early, were killed almost immediately in the withering crossfire. 3 others were severely wounded, leaving only 6 Americans still capable of fighting. In that crucial moment, Corporal Alvin York suddenly found himself the senior non-commissioned officer of what remained of the patrol. He was now responsible not only for the lives of his 5 remaining men, but also for guarding 20 German prisoners in the middle of an intense firefight. The tactical situation could hardly have been more desperate. York and his 5 remaining soldiers were pinned down in the valley with virtually no cover and no immediate hope of rescue. German machine gunners positioned on the surrounding hills had clear fields of fire and were systematically trying to eliminate the surviving Americans. York quickly assessed the dire situation with the same calm, analytical mind that had served him during hunting expeditions in the Tennessee mountains. He positioned his remaining men to guard the German prisoners and began studying the enemy machine gun positions scattered across the surrounding hills. From his position in the valley, York could see muzzle flashes from multiple German machine gun nests. The weapons were positioned at different elevations, creating deadly interlocking fields of fire that made movement extremely dangerous. It was at this critical moment that York made the decision that would change his life forever. Instead of trying to escape or waiting for rescue, he would attack the German positions single-handedly. Using the same fieldcraft skills he had developed during years of hunting in the Tennessee mountains, York began systematically eliminating the German machine gunner. He moved from position to position within the valley, using trees and rocks for cover, methodically picking off enemy soldiers with his Springfield rifle. York's marksmanship that day was absolutely extraordinary. He later described his tactics. "Every time I saw a German, I just touched him off. At first, I was shooting at the machine gunners, but that was bringing the rest of them up, so I changed my tactics. I began to pick off the officers and non-coms first. I knew that if I could do away with the leaders, the rest would quit." The German soldiers were completely amazed by York's incredible accuracy. They had never encountered shooting like this in all their years of warfare. Men would expose themselves for just a fraction of a second, only to be immediately shot down by the American marksman. York was shooting with exactly the same precision he had used to hunt squirrels in Tennessee, except now he was hunting German soldiers. Each shot was carefully aimed, and virtually every shot found its target. As York systematically eliminated the machine gunners, the German defensive fire began to slacken. The surviving enemy soldiers were becoming increasingly reluctant to expose themselves, knowing that the deadly American marksman seemed capable of hitting anything he could see. At one dramatic point during the battle, a German lieutenant and 5 soldiers attempted to charge York's position with fixed bayonets. York calmly drew his .45 caliber pistol and shot all 6 men before they could reach him, starting with the last man in line and working forward. "I didn't want the front ones to know that I was getting the back ones," York later explained. "I learned that trick back home hunting wild turkeys. When you're hunting turkeys, you never shoot the front bird first. You shoot the last one, and then the second to last, and so on. That way the others don't get spooked and scatter." The psychological effect on the remaining German soldiers was devastating. They had watched their machine gunners picked off one by one, seen their officers fall, and witnessed 6 men with bayonets shot down in rapid succession. The German major who had been captured earlier began shouting orders to his men, but York cut him short. "If you don't stop that noise, I'll shoot you too," York warned. Realizing that continued resistance was futile, the German major began calling for his men to surrender. German soldiers began emerging from their positions with their hands raised, and York found himself with an ever-growing number of prisoners. By the time the shooting stopped, York had killed 25 German soldiers and captured 132 prisoners, including 4 officers. He had single-handedly silenced 35 machine gun nests and cleared the way for the American advance to continue. The march back to American lines was surreal. York, accompanied by his 5 surviving men, escorted 132 German prisoners through the forest. At one point, they encountered an American major who couldn't believe what he was seeing. "York," the major asked, "how many prisoners have you got?" "Honest, sir, I don't know," York replied. "I haven't had time to count them yet." When the prisoners were finally counted and the battlefield examined, the full scope of York's achievement became clear. In approximately 20 minutes, this Tennessee mountain man had accomplished what entire companies had failed to do in days of fighting. General John J. Pershing, the commander of American forces in France, personally interviewed York about the action. Pershing later wrote, "The exploit of Sergeant York was the greatest individual feat accomplished by any soldier in the AEF." On December 13, 1918, York's 31st birthday, General Pershing personally pinned the Medal of Honor on York's chest. France awarded him the Croix de Guerre and made him a Chevalier of the Legion of Honor. Italy gave him the Cross of the Order of Saints Maurice and Lazarus. In total, York received military decorations from 7 different countries. When York returned to the United States in May 1919, he was greeted as a national hero. Ticker tape parades were held in his honor in New York City. He was invited to the White House to meet President Woodrow Wilson, and he received offers for commercial endorsements, movie deals, and lecture tours that would have made him wealthy. But York turned down almost all of these opportunities. His religious faith had not wavered, and he remained uncomfortable with profiting from his wartime actions. "I ain't proud of killing them Germans," he said. "I done my duty like any American boy ought to do, but I sure am sorry it had to be done." Instead of cashing in on his fame, York returned to his beloved Tennessee mountains. He married his longtime sweetheart, Gracie Williams, and settled down to farm the same land where he had grown up. He He used his celebrity status not to enrich himself, but to improve conditions in his impoverished mountain community. York became an advocate for education and founded the Alvin York Institute, a school that provided educational opportunities for mountain children who otherwise would have had none. He worked tirelessly to bring roads, electricity, and modern conveniences to the remote Cumberland Mountains. The 1941 Hollywood movie Sergeant York, starring Gary Cooper, introduced York's story to a new generation of Americans. Cooper won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his portrayal, and the film was nominated for 11 Oscars total. York initially opposed the making of the movie, but eventually agreed when he was promised that the proceeds would help fund his educational foundation. During World War II, when he was in his 50s, York tried to re-enlist but was rejected due to his age and declining health. However, he threw himself into the war effort, selling war bonds and speaking at rallies to support American troops overseas. Alvin York died on September 2, 1964, at the age of 76. He was buried in the Wolf River Cemetery in Pall Mall, Tennessee, not far from the log cabin where he was born. Today, York's legacy extends far beyond his famous 20 minutes in the Argonne Forest. He represents the quintessential American story, a poor mountain boy who rose to greatness through skill, courage, and moral conviction. His struggle to reconcile his religious beliefs with his military duty resonates with anyone who has faced difficult moral choices. The marksmanship skills that York developed hunting for food in the Tennessee mountains proved to be exactly what was needed in the trenches of France. His ability to remain calm under pressure and his absolute accuracy with a rifle were all products of his mountain upbringing and personal character. Most importantly, York's story demonstrates that heroism can come from the most unlikely sources. The poor mountain boy, who once applied for conscientious objector status, became the most celebrated American soldier of World War I. In an era when individual soldiers can feel lost in the machinery of modern warfare, Alvin York reminds us that one person, properly motivated and skilled, can still change the course of history. His 20 minutes in the Argonne Forest saved countless American lives and helped hasten the end of World War I. Today, when visitors come to Pall Mall, Tennessee, they can see the log cabin where York was born, visit his grave, and tour the school he founded. These simple monuments remind us that true heroism isn't about seeking glory. It's about doing what's right when others are counting on you. Sergeant Alvin York proved that sometimes the most effective weapon in war isn't technology or tactics. It's the unbreakable spirit of someone who knows why they're fighting and is willing to sacrifice everything for their beliefs and their brothers in arms.